So welcome again to the annual Industry Update Panel. I want to thank Audrey for giving me the opportunity to organize this for, I think it's the fourth or fifth year since the conference has been going. We've been having this panel. And it's a good opportunity to share with the attendees some what might be new to you initiatives and services in the industry. So the topics are not linked, so we're going to inventively go in alphabetical order by topic, and we'll save all our questions to the end with a caveat. Steve, who should be easily identified on the panel, has a taxi to catch for a plane. So if you have any questions about his presentation, if you could ask them first, then he can make sure that he makes his taxi and makes his plane to Florence. So we should not feel sorry for him. So we're going to start with Roz Lynch from Copyright Hub, and then we'll just go from one to the other and save questions to the end.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity to share with you what is, it is not an exclusive project, a project that's exclusively about publishing. So I'm assuming that most people have not heard about it, and I'm going to start by giving you a, do I need to press summary? Yeah. Right, I'm going to start by giving you a little bit of background about how the idea for the Copyright Hub came about, and then spend the rest of my time actually talking about the hub itself. The Copyright Hub actually came out from the Hargreaves Review into Intellectual Property and Growth in the UK. And Professor Hargreaves published his study in May 2010, and he made a number of recommendations, many of them related to changing the copyright law in the UK, and those changes are currently going through. But one of the things that he suggested was that the government should set up something called a digital copyright exchange. And in November of 2011, Richard Hooper was appointed by the UK government to lead a study, a feasibility study into that, creating this digital copyright exchange. And as background as well, I am a British civil servant, and for those that don't know, when someone is appointed by the government to do a study for them, they get given a civil servant to work with them. And I was the civil servant given to Richard Hooper to work with him. And I've been working on this project since November 2011. But what Richard did was to say, well, you know, he doesn't believe in just coming in and setting something up. So we spent quite a bit of time actually trying to understand what exactly was the problem we were addressing. So the study basically was to find out what was wrong with copyright licensing, because Professor Hargreaves said that copyright licensing was not fit for purpose. So we went in and we did a diagnostic phase and actually had 90 face-to-face meetings. We ran a consultation where we had over 120 responses, and we basically asked creators, licensors, etc., what is the problem that you're facing in actually being able to license content? And we published the first report called Rights and Wrongs in March 2012, which actually set out what we found in that diagnostic phase. And then we went back for a second round of conversation and said, okay, so these are the problems you've identified. What are we going to do about it? And the second report, Copyright Works, was published in July 2012. And that's where we said how we would like to see the issues that were first identified dealt with and addressed. So basically, in a nutshell, the main issues that came throughout that study was the issue around complexity. And it wasn't just complexity of process, but also organizations. You know, Richard likes to tell this story. It's one that I think we should stop using this example now, but I'll say it just because it's an easy example. For schools, there are 14 different types of types of licenses that they need to acquire, and they have 12 different organizations that they have to go to get that. And our argument was, well, if you're a teacher or a head teacher or whatever, licensing is not your first job. It is actually teaching. It should be made a lot easier. We're not saying that there should be a single license covering everything, because we know that's not likely, that's not possible. But you should be able to go to one or two places and say, I need this license for music, I need this to play this film, I need this. And you should be able there and then to buy 3 or 4 licenses you need, rather than having to go to 4 different organizations. So that's, and the issue of complexity in terms of organization and process just makes the whole of the copyright issue, licensing issue, extremely complex for people, because they really don't know, a lot of people don't know where to begin. And it was quite interesting that, again, we were told, well, copyright is always complex. It's always been complex. There's absolutely nothing you will be able to do about it, so you might as well just forget it and go away. And we were actually told that. I'm not making it up. The other thing that people said to us repeatedly was that it's really, really difficult to find out who owns the rights to what content, very often in different countries, because in some cases it's different people. And finding out who owns the rights to this particular version of something was actually really difficult. And we talked to small companies just starting up that said they spent months trying to identify who owned the rights so they could get a license. And they were burning money without actually making anything, because they were not able to find the rights holders for a very long time. The second issue, or the third issue rather, which we identified that we were actually very, very surprised at, was the poor quality of the data. In a lot of organizations we spoke to, they couldn't categorically tell you who owned the rights to all the content that they had. And what that meant was that not all creators were being paid, or they were not being paid accurately. And so we were very struck by the fact that in a lot of the collecting societies, there was money sitting there because they weren't necessarily sure, 100% sure where that money should go. And then the last point is the one where we really majored on. And that is, if you want to put, for example, music on your wedding video, that's not the same thing as if you're putting music in a big Hollywood movie. But in some organizations, you had to go through almost the same process. And what we were saying is, if it's only something, a license that's a value of £20 or whatever it is, you shouldn't have to go through the legal department in this. It should become it should be really a fairly straightforward transaction. And therefore, the transaction costs should be a lot lower. Now, let me make it very clear that we were always talking about the cost of doing the transaction, never about the price. The price is entirely the rights holders. That's it's up to them. If they want to charge £1 million for their rights, that's not our business. We can't say anything about that. But what we wanted to talk about was, how can you make the process of people actually finding you and buying a license a lot more straightforward than it currently is, or it was up to about a year ago. So a number of things were recommended. We thought it would be a good idea if there was something like a one-stop shop for schools to go to and buy all the different licenses they wanted. Another issue that came up a lot for us is about the fact that, particularly in images, very often the metadata was stripped out, and so people didn't know who actually owned the image, and therefore we needed to find a way of reducing the incidence of that, because I don't think we will ever fully stop it. Obviously, we need to do something about data quality, and for us it was about industries using the international standard identifiers where they exist. We know there exists in music, there exists in publishing, there are 2 of them in audiovisual, there are none in images. And so as with the digital age, people are using a lot more different types of repertoire, whereas before they might only be interested in publishing. Now people want to put some text, they want some music, they want images, and they want it all to use on the same project. And therefore we need to have much better data so that people can identify, if they say Ros Lynch, is it Ros Lynch the author, am I the photographer, or is it the same person, etc. So the importance of having and using international standard identifiers is critical. Repertoire imbalance was a very strange one, and it's not one that I ever thought was a major issue, but it's one that Richard has been majoring on for ages. And that's a lot to do with the fact that, there is a long window between when films first come out and when they come out on DVD, or you can download them off the web or whatever. And when people can't get, because in this, because now people want to be able to have access to things almost immediately. Having to wait 3 or 4 months mean that very often, if they can't find it legally, they will go off and look for it and get it illegally. Music licensing, there are, for those that don't know, there are 2 music collecting societies in this country. And if you play music, you have to have 2 separate licenses. And very often, small businesses, the hairdresser that works out her garage or something doesn't actually know that, but she's playing her radio, and she will be rung up by one organization saying, do you have a music license? Well, you need a music license. You have to pay 150 or 180 pounds. And then a month later, she will get another visit and say, do you have a music license? And she will go, yes, but you don't actually have our music license, and that's another 150 pounds that you owe us. So we've been trying to work with the 2 collecting societies to say there must be something that you can do about that to make it much easier for people to be able to get the license to play the same song without having to go through 2 separate organizations. And the final and probably the main recommendation, and the one that I will focus on for the rest of my time here, is on the Copyright Hub. Right, what is it? The Copyright Hub is, I guess, it's a web portal, not I guess, it is a web portal, and it will have, when it is fully operating, a number of organizations connected to it. And what it aims to do is to allow those people that are looking for material, looking for a license to use content, to be able to easily find those that have the rights to issue those licenses. And I should say at the outset, if I haven't said it already, it's a collaborative project. So it's music, it's audiovisual, it's publishing, it's images. It is not just one part of the creative industries that's doing this. And because we've brought together the 4 main creative industries, what it has also become, as I've said there, is a forum for collaboration. So by having them around the table, they were actually able to admit that actually we, until now, have been operating a lot in silos. But as I said, the public now don't want just music. They want music, and they want film, and they want various things. So by bringing them together, they've actually realized that there's probably a lot more scope to do things collaboratively and across different genres rather than just sticking to their own. And basically, the principle that underlines the Copyright Hub is that it's voluntary. We're not in any way forcing anyone to be there. It's opt-in. It's a not-for-profit organization. We've just recently set up the Copyright Hub Limited, which is not-for-profit, and it is very much industry-led. When Richard did the report, he was very clear that whilst he could write recommendations for government, they probably wouldn't mean anything, but if it was industry-led and industry-funded, and the industry actually took responsibility for sorting the issues out themselves, then they were likely to have far more impact than if it was just a report written for government. Right, so there are 3 things that the Hub aims to do. One, it aims to raise awareness about copyright, about the importance of getting a license before you use someone's material, and the importance of copyright licensing to the survival of the creative industries. And that's hugely important message to get across. So the Hub will have lots of information, videos, etc., to help people understand what copyright is and to help them through the complexity that I referred to earlier. We want, as I said, to make it a place where rights users and potential rights users can get the licenses that they want very easily. And it's a place where we hope in time creators will register their rights. We are very clear that Burns says that registration of copyright is not mandated under Byrne, and we are not in any way saying that you have to do this, but we just think that it will make it a lot easier for people to find you if there is a database somewhere where your information is included. Where we're targeting, we are not targeting the top of the market. Jumping to the bottom of my list there. It is not the big publishing deals that you do. As I said, this is about the little uses at the bottom. This is about the person that wants a single track of a song to put on their website, or wants a quotation from a book to use on a program that they're printing for something. It's what we describe as a very long tail of users and uses, the very bottom of the market where the transactions should be low cost, but where the high volume at very, very small prices, like the wedding video I talked about earlier. And it's targeted mainly at individuals and small businesses, but we're not saying if a big organization wants you to go in and use the hub that they can't. But we just want to be clear that we think that this is the bit of the market that is not as well served as it might be at the moment. We're doing this in a staged approach because we were very wary of developing some big portal and then nobody ever looked at it. So we launched an initial pilot on July 8th, very small number of organizations connected. It is only at this stage doing signposting and navigation. It is not actually doing anything more than that. Our intention, however, is to grow it, and actually this is what the front page looks like at the moment if you go into the Copyright Hub. You have 3 buttons, find out, and that's where you find out about all the different organizations, about the law, about where to go for help. There's get permission, that's for licensing, and then the protect your work, that's where the registration comes in. And it's done according to the industries that I mentioned earlier, so there's music, images, text, video, and multimedia. Hopefully that one has very little content in it because there's not a lot of multimedia licensing at the moment, but we hope that that will grow this time. Phase 1B, which we hope to do later this year, is just expand the number of organizations that are linked to the hub. Because we don't want to skew the market in any way. We were just doing the pilot, testing it out with a small number, but we want as many organizations as possible to join. Phase 2 is where the major work will come, and we hope that that will happen in about a year's time. And with Phase 2, what we would like to do is to have all the major databases and stuff of rights holders and information then linked to the Copyright Hub. So if you came into Tony, if you don't mind if I use it as an example, Tony came in and said, I want this particular image of Winston Churchill from this era, and I want to use it on my website or in a book for X number of copies will be printed, etc. You should be able to put that information into the Copyright Hub. It goes off and it searches the connected databases and brings you back a definitive answer on where you can go to get a license. Says, here, this organization can license you for these purposes. If you are interested, you proceed and click here and go off. The go off bit is still being decided whether or not you purchase it there or you have to link into the actual licensor's website. At the moment, we're still working through that. And phase 3 is where we develop any additional technology that will deal with the registration of works, protection of works issue. And we are in talks with the Intellectual Property Office in this country about how the Copyright Hub might support their response to the Orphan Works Directive and what they're going to do about orphan works. In terms of benefits, we just think that for users, it's going to make the whole process a lot less time consuming, and that means that the transaction costs for them will be a lot less. Hopefully it will give them more choice, because if we get as many creators as possible to put their content in the hub, it means that people have a lot more to choose from. They will have more options to find legitimate sources, we hope, and not have to resort to infringing copyright. And importantly, as I said earlier, it's about stressing the importance of copyright licensing and the importance of that to the survival of creators and the creative industries. For creators, we hope that it will increase the overall size of the pie for them. As I said, it's about hundreds of small deals, and it may be only £20, but if you're getting hundreds of these coming through, it will amount to something eventually. hopefully with less people infringing, they will have to worry less about pursuing infringers. I don't think we will ever stop that, because there was some research published yesterday which actually showed that the most persistent infringers are actually some of the biggest buyers of legal materials. So I'm not quite sure there's an issue with whether or not that's choice again, that they're infringing things that they can't get legal access to, or what, I'm not quite sure. As I said before, greater collaboration among creators, and then the benefits of protecting your work. Right, but there are obviously some huge challenges with doing the Copyright Hub. I think we've made an extremely big, significant coup by actually getting all the creative representatives from all the creative industries around the table. Because when we first started this work, everybody said, no, we don't talk to them, and they didn't like them. And actually getting them in the room and actually getting them to talk to each other and to work on practical solutions rather than accusing each other of, trying to make their material whatever it is, which really happened at the beginning. So we've made a huge step, but there are lots of technical challenges. That query that Tony would put in, how does Tony put in a query into a machine and the machine uses that and goes off and talks to other machines, etc. We're really keen on using existing technologies and developments where they exist, because we do not want to go off and reinvent the wheel. It certainly would be a waste of money, so we are actually looking around to see what's out there already that might be useful for the hub. The data is a problem, because if you've got databases that actually are incomplete or incorrect, we do not want to perpetuate the practice of paying the wrong person or not paying people for their work. So we need to make sure that across all the industries they actually have good information on who the creators are, what rights they hold, and what licenses they already permit. That information is currently private in a lot of collecting societies. They do not make that information publicly available, so we need to convince them to make that available at least to the hub so we can search it. And then for me, I think one of the most important things is that the hub needs to add value. There is no point building something which just does what everything else already out there does. So we spent quite a bit of time this summer we've commissioned researchers to go out to work with creators, with students, with teachers, etc., to find out exactly what it is they would want the hub to do. And we need to make sure that as we develop it into that second stage, we actually do that, because that's the only way that we will continue to add value and that people will use the hub. In terms of the next steps, we're going to complete that user research I mentioned. We are due to report to government on the progress we've made in the next, actually a week tomorrow. The report needs to go into government, and I've been trying to find 10 minutes every day to at least try to finish the report. We are, as I mentioned earlier, we created a not-for-profit company, the Copyright Hub Limited, so we're now putting the right governance structure in place. We're going to be recruiting non-executive directors, etc., to make sure that it is run properly. As I said, we're going to expand the number of organizations. We are beginning detailed discussions with a developer to do that second phase for us. And so we'll be having workshops with them starting next month, just to make sure that we give them a clear vision of what we want the hub to do, or what users want the hub to do, rather. Obviously, at some point, the hub needs to start to pay for itself. And we need to do quite a bit of work in terms of, we don't want to charge people for asking the hub a question, so we need to think of ways that the hub could actually keep itself going without doing that. And ultimately, we need to get more people to go into the hub to use it, particularly when it's fully functioning, but we want as many people as possible to know that the hub is coming along very soon. And further information, do go to the Copyright Hub. We want more organizations to join up, so I'm just ros@copyrighthub.co.uk, so please do drop me an email and do say, yes, we want to link up to the hub, and we will be delighted to do that. Thank you very much.